All right, starting lesson 7.6, factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, now in the problems we're working with, the a value is not 1. Okay, so that changes the procedure a little bit. All right, but starting with example 1, first thing you'll always want to ask yourself is, can you factor something out of every term? And yeah, in this case, we could factor out a 5. Leaving us with x squared plus 15, sorry, not 15, plus 3x plus 2. All right, now here I have x squared plus bx plus c. I'll apply the big X method to this. 3 on top, 2 on the bottom. I need two numbers that add up to 3. Multiply to give me 2. What are those two numbers? 1 and 2. So I have 5 times x plus 1 times x plus 2. And now I have completely factored this polynomial or trinomial. All right, for example 2, notice that we have polynomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a does not equal 1. Now if you look at all these terms here, there's no greatest common factor. We can't factor anything out. Same with this polynomial. All right, so what do you do then? We're going to apply the big X method, but it's a variation of it. So on the top, we're still going to put our b value. Okay, that's our b value. But on the bottom, we're not putting just c alone now. We're putting a times c. So 4 times 3, which is 12. For part b, it's 3 times 2, which is 6. Okay? And now you do the same thing. What are two numbers that add up to 13? Multiply to give you 12. Two numbers that add up to negative 7 and multiply to give you 6. All right, so what are two numbers that add up to 13 and multiply to give you 12? That one's pretty easy. 1 and 12. Okay, so it's not this easy. You can't just do this now. Okay, it doesn't work that way because this value here does not equal 1. If it was 1, then no problem, we're done. But that does not work in this case. So what do you do with these two numbers now that we just obtained? Well, I take the first term, 4x squared, and I take the second term now, and I break it up using these two values. So plus 1x plus 12x, and then plus 3. All right, let's do it with the other one. What are two numbers that work? It's going to be negative 1 and negative 6. All right. So you could go through the trial and error process, but once again, once you get more familiar with these problems, it becomes pretty easy to figure out what numbers work. All right. So I take the first term, 3x squared, and I break up the middle term using these two values, negative 1x minus 6x. And then I have plus 2. All right, now we're using a new method known as the grouping method. So for the grouping method, you group the first two terms and you group the last two terms. First two, last two. Then you ask yourself, what's the greatest common factor to the first group? Well, I could pull out an x. And what's left over? 4x plus 1. What can you pull out of the second group? I could pull out a 3. Positive 3. What's left over? 4x plus 1. And for the grouping method, when you're first applying the big X and then you do grouping, all right, you should be ending up with a common factor. All right, so here I have 4x plus 1. Now I have two terms. Here's my first term. Here's my second term. And what do they have in common? They have a 4x plus 1. So I'll pull that out. And what's left over? What's left over is x plus 3. All right, so there it is. I factored it. So this is known as the big X with grouping method. Let's go to the second example. Same deal. What can I pull out of the first group? Pull out an x, leaving me with 3x minus 1. What can I pull out of the second group? I could pull out I'll pull out a negative 2. You could have just pulled out a 2, but then you would have have ended up with a common factor. All right, so that's our reason for pulling out a -2. So then my common factor is 3x minus 1. I pull that out, and what's left over? X minus 2. Done. All right, they become really simple to do once you get the hang of it. All right, for example 3, all right, can't factor anything out of all the terms, so this is going to be a big X with grouping problem. 5 goes on top, 2 times 7 goes on the bottom. Oh, don't forget the negative. That throws everything off if you forget that. Okay, two numbers that add up to -5, multiply to give you 14. Or -14, sorry. See? Gotta keep track of those negatives. So that would be 2 and -7. All right, so I take the first term, then I take the middle term, split it up using those two values, and the last term. Now I do what? Now I group. All right, what can I pull out of the first group? I could pull out a 2x, leaving me with x plus 1. What can I pull out of the second group? I could pull out a -7, leaving me with x plus 1. All right, now what can I factor out of both terms here? I could factor out x plus 1, and what's left over? 2x minus 7. Done. And the last example. All right, can we factor anything out of the three terms? No. So it's a big X with grouping problem. So -8 goes on top, -4 times 5 on the bottom. All right, what two numbers add up to -8, multiply to give you -20? That would be 2 and -10. All right, so I take the first term, then I take the second term, break it up using those two values, plus 5. All right, now I have the first group and I have the second group. What can you factor out of the first group? I can factor out a 2x, I'll factor out the negative, leave me with 2x minus 1. Yep. What can I pull out of the second group? I could pull out a -2, and I'm pulling out the negative intentionally because then I end up with a common factor. And sorry, that shouldn't have been -2. It's -5. Okay. All right, and then now I have my common factor in both terms, 2x minus 1. And what's left over? -2x minus 5. And for our final answer, there's two things we could have done. We could have factored out this negative from the whole expression at the beginning, or at the very end you could just factor it out from the binomial. So I'm going to factor out a -1, and then I have 2x minus 1, and then I have 2x plus 5. Okay, so there's different ways to approach it. All right, and then I don't really need that -1 there, so I'll just have a negative 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 5. All right, that's the most simplified or most factored form of the answer. That's all there is to it. If you have any questions, if you need any clarification, please make sure to ask for help. Begin the assignment at the bottom of the webpage.